skin and bone, jumping on a tram car for a ride. I can remember then, 'cause I was just a boy of 10, hanging around the old quayside. Now all the capstans and the cargo boats and stevedores are gone to where all the old ships go, but memories just like the seas live on. 'Cause that was when coal was king, the river was a living thing, and I was just a boy, but it was mine. The Corey time. For this was a big river. I want you all to know that I was proud. This was a big river, but that was long ago. That's not now. That's not now.
After a very long 2 hours, calling in at every little settlement along the way, the bus finally pulled in to Newcastle Haymarket. I'd been looking forward to seeing our old Mecca, the Haymarket pub, which was opposite the bus station. To my shock, it had been replaced by a car park, totally flattened. Something in me felt demolished too. Aside from the fact that the fine building was over 200 years old, it was an indelible part of my soul. I just stood there, staring at the space around which so much of our lives had revolved. It was a given fact that everybody would be in there on Saturday nights. No need to make arrangements. On the left had been the bar room with the jukebox, where the younger crowd would go. We would sit at the bar on the high stools with torn red leather covers. 64p for a bottle of Dog, Newcastle brown ale. Funny how I could still remember the exact price. The internal walls were covered in dark wood Victorian panelling, somewhat battered. On the right was the lounge, where the older folk would sit, or where you would go for some peace and quiet. At the back was the snug, which was like a tiny living room. Looking back, we were almost on top of each other in there, all squeezed in along the leather sofas. Young life, so full of promise. And then the whole thing had suddenly ended that night, when I saw Tanya with Jake. At that moment I suddenly realized she would have been carrying my baby by then. If I had known, how differently things would have panned out. I headed down Percy Street to meet for the first time the person who had been inside Tanya that night. My son. I got there in plenty of time in order to watch Jeff arrive, and to prepare myself. How on earth would I open this conversation? I ordered an Earl Grey tea and sat on the terrace, just a few metres from the Tyne, surveying the bridges. Immediately to my left, some 30 metres up, was the high-level bridge. It was built in 1849 by Robert Stevenson, son of George Stevenson, from whom we Geordies take our name. I remember Dad telling me it was built from 5,000 tons of iron, an amount I could not comprehend as a small child. I always loved its straight, heavy, solid feeling, a contrast to my airiness, perhaps. A little further on was the swing bridge, only a few metres above the water, a glorious red and white colour, with blue signal box on top. As children, we loved to watch it pivot open on its central axis, allowing the huge new ships out to sea. We were impressed that the man in the box could move such a huge hulk of metal simply by pulling a lever, and would have given anything to do it ourselves. It was built on the site where the Romans had built their bridge. Past that was the Tyne Bridge, that famous Tyneside icon, built in 1928. It was built in the shape of a parabola to give it greater strength. Like the parables of Christ, I reflected. When learning Greek, I discovered that the word parable comes from the Greek word parabola. It starts on earth, soars to heaven and returns to earth. In other words, it tells a story with a higher meaning. My gaze rested on the flowing river itself. The North Tyne originates in the Cheviot Hills, where Jake lived, while the South Tyne starts in the Pennines. I thought back to the days when ships were still built on the Tyne. Mum took us to see a ship being launched once, when we were young. We had been amazed at the size of it, and marvelled how this huge chunk of iron would actually float. We could scarcely comprehend that the ship was held together by huge rivets. I remembered now the gigantic size of the biceps of a riveter we met that day. In retrospect, I suppose he'd been trying to chat Mum up, but it took more than huge biceps to impress her. My reverie was broken by a strong, clear voice, just a hint of a Geordie accent. "You must be Mark, judging by your outfit." I stood to greet Jeff and shook his hand. Firm, but not too firm. Good. "You must be Jeff." "Lovely to meet you." Jeff looked me right in the eyes for a few moments, as if trying to read something there. I was taken aback at how alike his eyes were to Tanya's. Green, almost luminous. His smile was also like hers, a little playful, although he had a more serious air about him. That bit must be due to my genes, I mused. Jeff's hair had a similar quality to Tanya's, shiny and black, although it was very short. He was dressed simply in jeans and t-shirt. "I see you're drinking tea. Not like the old days with Dad, eh?" "Yeah, I think I drank enough back then to last me a lifetime. But you go ahead and get yourself a pint, son." As soon as the word was said, I froze. I had meant son in the general sense, not the particular one. I wondered if Jeff noticed. Probably not, judging by his reply. Yeah, I'm not bothered about beer. I'll get a coffee. Do you want a refill?" Thanks, Earl Grey, please." Jeff disappeared inside. My first impression was of a mature lad, with an insight beyond his years. "He's not as daft as I was anyway," I smiled to myself. Suddenly, I felt a huge sense of relief. He is not a needy person. Jeff returned with the drinks, and I remember how carefully he put down the tray. I also noticed his fine hands with elongated fingers. I opened. "So, what do you do with yourself, Jeff?" "I'm doing my A-levels. Will be finished in June with a bit of luck. I want to do wood carving. I've just been offered a place at City and Guilds Art School in London, if I get the grades." "Lovely. It's good to do something you love with your life, right?" "Yeah, otherwise what's the point, eh?" He sipped his coffee and continued. "My dad really wasted his life, didn't he? I'm glad you didn't." "You don't think being a monk is a wasted life, then?" "Many do." "Not at all. You've dedicated your life to finding meaning. What's better than that? It's not for me, though. But tell me what it's like being a monk. I have no idea. Well, what can I say? We get up very early, spend a few hours in church, then we work all day, then food, then a few more hours in church, then bed. Like the t-shirt. Eat, sleep, pray, repeat. I laughed. And that brings you closer to God, does it? I hope so. You don't mind my asking, I hope. Do you sort of feel God's presence? That's a big question. The short answer is yes. It comes and goes. I think maybe I've felt it. I'm not sure. Sometimes when I'm carving, a kind of sweetness in my heart, maybe a kind of burning. I close my eyes and feel that someone is helping guide my hand. I was taken aback for a moment before replying. That is good, really good. I guess many of us were drawn to become monks after that kind of experience. But certainly not all are called to do so. We do need some prayerful people to stay in the world, otherwise the whole thing goes down the pan. Jeff let out an infectious laugh, which spread to me before I knew it. My gaze turned to the river. Look, it's a cormorant diving. Jeff got up to look. Yeah, we see him here now. The river's much cleaner. Magnificent birds. We watched it dive and scanned the river to see where it would come up. I gather you carve animals, Jeff? Yeah, I've loved animals ever since I can remember. They've kept something which humans have lost, a kind of innocence. I try to capture that. I haven't really succeeded, yet. I see their expression in my mind's eye, but I can't quite get it down. Frustrating. Keep trying, Jeff. Oh, it is a difficult path, but a very worthy one. I feel like Dad should have done something arty. He could never settle anything worldly. He misses you, Jeff. Well, I miss him sometimes, but we just seem to row. I think he's best in small doses. Sorry, that sounds heartless, doesn't it? I don't know, I just get frustrated with him. You get on well with Tanya's mum? Ruth? Yeah, she's lovely. She never judges people. Yes, I met her a few times when I was seeing your mum. I saw a shadow pass across Jeff's face. Sorry, maybe you didn't know. I used to go out with her before Jake. Jeff looked over to the cormorant, his face saying clearly he did not want to go down that conversational avenue. After a few awkward moments, he said, Their necks, so graceful, aren't they? But it's murder trying to get that down in wood. We launched into a lively discussion about art, much safer than emotions. As the discussion progressed, I realised the moment to reveal my secret had slipped away. The conversation was flowing. We were bonding. That was more important for now. A brutal revelation at that point might have killed the relationship before it had started. Jeff asked, We looked at icons on my course. They're from the Orthodox Church, aren't they? They talked about them having reversed perspective, but I'm not sure I understand it properly. Well, firstly, I think the name is wrong. All art was done like that until linear perspective was created in the Renaissance. It was the Renaissance artists who reversed what had always been done, rather than the icon painters who made an innovation. Linear perspective is based on mathematics. It has a kind of logical feel. It loses some of the intimacy of what went before. That's why some modern artists try to go back, the Cubists, for example. Interesting. Did the logical approach reflect a different theology of Orthodox and Catholic? Goodness me, you are well informed. Well, not really, I cheated. I knew we were orthodox. I did a bit of reading last night. Well, still impressive. It's a long story. I think there is some truth in what you're saying, but as you know, it's always more complicated when you dive in. From my personal experience, I found something in the Orthodox Church which I had not found in other churches. A sense of God's presence, subtle but unmistakable. For me, anyway. I'd love to come and visit your monastery, if I'm allowed. Well, of course, that would be great. My heart leapt. Perhaps that would be the place to reveal the truth. You will always be very welcome there, Jeff. Nice, he nodded. After a few moments, Jeff asked, Dad said you'd been to India. What were you doing there? What was it like? Yes, I spent a few months there in my early 20s. I suppose I was seeking the truth. I was interested in Eastern philosophy and religion at the time. I stayed in a Buddhist monastery in Dharamsala, where the Tibetan government in exile is based, where the Dalai Lama lives. I remember a conversation I had with an old monk who was asking me what I was hoping to find and why I couldn't find it in my own country. I think I mumbled something about our religion being corrupt and violent, and he roared with laughter. My dear child, do you think any religion remains incorrupt? Have you any idea of Tibetan history? Have you read anything of our brutal civil wars? You will find the same problems in our religion that you have in yours. I suppose that was the beginning of the end of my love affair with the East. Interesting. Thanks, saves me the bother of going, he laughed. So you took up Christianity after that? Not immediately. I suppose I went through a kind of atheist phase. And then I met my elder in Greece. That started my process of conversion. Jeff sipped his coffee and digested what I had said. After a while he asked, Are you going to see Dad again? Yes, I'm getting the bus back up there the day after tomorrow. Can I come? Well, that would be great. Jake will be delighted to see you. Okay, let me know what bus you're taking and I'll meet you at the Haymarket. My mind reeled as I thought. The last time you and I were at the Haymarket. I managed to say, I'll be on the 9:30. Great, that's settled. I better get back to Ruth. He stood up, followed quickly by me, and we shook hands. I might have some more questions for you, if that's okay, Mark. Of course. I might have some for you too. Jeff strode off, purposefully, and I watched him fade into the distance. In my mind hung the words the Father spoke when Christ was baptized. My dearly beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased. Sometimes it is like that. After a particular event, one hears an old line from the Gospel afresh, with another layer of meaning added. I walked over to the river's edge and leant on the hefty cast iron railings, gazing into the water. For a long time I watched the cormorant diving and reappearing, before finally settling on some driftwood. I noticed that the river was flowing in the opposite direction to usual, due to the incoming tide. Although we were some 10 miles from the sea, the Tyne is still tidal here. Flowing backwards, just like my life, I mused. I finished the cold dregs of Earl Grey and headed back to Mum's house. What on earth would she say about it all? It struck me for the first time that Jeff was her grandson. Some words of my elder came to mind. The ripples we create spread far and wide.
Father was a working man. He earned our living with his hands. He had to cross the river